Avengers. I hope they remember you. I do hope those that survive remember everything.
Alright guys, so before I officially get started, I just want to show two things, to first off save some time on the next day vlog, and their Avengers Infinity War stuff, as well, which are both on this wall. So first off right here, you guys know I make movie props and replicas like all the time, but this is one of Captain America's new, Wakandan shields that he uses on the movies. And of course I didn't make two, but I made out of paper or construction paper, and I actually did layer it in some parts, and then I painted it and dry brushed it and then put it together. And I also did make a strap, and I actually velcroed it to the wall, but you can see the different layers and everything. So it's not as amazing as other people's, of course, but it turned out pretty much as good as I wanted it to. Yeah, I put it with tape. But what really made it hold its shape is hot glue. That was really good, but I think it looks really, really cool under my AR-15 little Nerf gun replica thing. Yeah, so that is that, and here's a picture of it with me on it compared to Captain America and everything, and just all the pictures of it in more detail and everything. So yeah, so you can just see it on me, and the better detail of like all the lines up close and everything too. Yeah, so then over here is a new drawing. Of course you guys know this is my like superhero wall, but I couldn't fit this drawing anywhere on here. But you guys know for Thanos, I actually drew this Thanos, of course, with his armor and the Infinity Gauntlet with the stones in the wrong order, because that's how they were back then when I drew it, with the shooting star things in the background. And then I have all these posters that I showed last day vlog, and then I have my custom Lego minifigure Thanos right there, the Infinity Gauntlet, and then the Infinity Gauntlet comic book cover right there. But now I have this drawing, which is actually like one of my favorites of all time. I just really love it because, I mean, it's pretty darn 3D, but also just the colors and everything. And of course my favorite comic book item of all time. But yeah, so I actually drew this quite a darn while ago, like a month and a half ago or something like that. And finished it, but of course I had to wait until I figured out where the soul stone was, or yeah, and so to finish it, and then once I did, I finished it up. So you could say technically the soul stone isn't on Titan, but if you listen, Gamora actually found the map for it when she was working for Thanos on his home planet, which was Titan. So technically it is located on Vormir, but the map is found on on Titan. So that's why I drew Titan, plus I just really wanted to draw Titan and everything. But yeah, so that is my drawing. Right here I drew the Marvel logo, and then Infinity, which is really 3D. You can see I outlined it not only in my stylus, but also in like darker gray. And then the Infinity Stone, my signature. And then, yeah, you can see all the stones there, which I actually drew, like, some little, like, lens flares or whatever you want to call them, kind of going, 2 or 3 of them for each one going to where they originally came from. And, of course, for mine, I drew Loki's scepter, because I drew, like, where they originally came from, because, of course, mine was now in Vision's head, forehead. But, yeah, so mine, Loki scepter, Soul, Titan, and then Reality, the Ether, which is really 3D and cool. And then the Space Tesseract right there, and then Power the Orb, which that was somewhat annoying to draw, but not too bad. And then Time, Eye of Agamotto. So yeah, so you can just see all the shading. I went with like gold, and I did some yellow here and there, and then like the bronze kind of look too. And then all the mesh kind of look right there. And then the stones I did like lighter colors, and then darker around the lines I drew to make them kind of look 3D. Yeah, so that is my Infinity Gauntlet drawing. Happy to finally show that, and yeah, that is pretty much it. So I just want to show those two things real quick, so now we can get onto the movie review itself. Okay, so here we go with the review. Of course, as I said a while ago, this was probably going to be my biggest review of all time. It is. I believe I did edit it down a little bit to get it down to like 7 pages, so I'm reading you guys a little book. Yeah, so If you don't want to watch, then don't watch. But yeah, so I'm going to be reading kind of quick, so we can keep this video at least somewhat short. But just a warning, this is a full spoiler review. It's not even, it's kind of like the Alien Covenant one in a lot of my reviews. It's like a review and a full summary. This one, it's pretty much like me telling you the movie almost. So, but I think pretty much everyone that was going to see it went and saw it the opening weekend. But yeah, so let's get started. On May 4th, the third Avengers film was coming, but it was brought forward to April 27th instead on a hilarious Robert Downey Jr. Marvel conversation on Twitter. This film is what Marvel Studios has been building up to for 1 decade since Iron Man back in 2008. This is the biggest superhero film of all time. It is a conclusion to the first 18 Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first 3 phases. As I have said many times, it has been my #1 most anticipated movie of all time, since I've been waiting for this for the past 3.5 years or so. The main villain is my favorite comic book villain of all time, the Mad Titan Thanos, who comes from my favorite moon and all of one of my favorite passions, space, Saturn's biggest moon, Titan. And he also wears my favorite comic book item of all time, the Infinity Gauntlet. This is also the longest MCU film of all time with a runtime of 2 hours and 29 minutes. And this is all why this is my first film that I am ever doing a whole separate video on my review instead of included on a day vlog or a life update. This film combines the Avengers with the Guardians of the Galaxy and tons of other heroes, and it is kind of based off of my favorite comic book, at least for its cover, the Infinity Gauntlet. Back there. But of course, a big part of that was Adam Warlock, who currently has only been seen in his cradle at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Aisha. This is Avengers Infinity War, directed by Joe and Anthony Russo. And get ready for this, because it stars Josh Brolin as Thanos, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man / Tony Stark, Chris Evans as Captain America or the Captain Without a Country, or Captain No Man / Steve Rogers, or Nomad. Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Mark Ruffalo as Hulk / Bruce Banner, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow / Natasha Romanoff, Tom Holland as Spider-Man or Iron Spider / Peter Parker, Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange / Doctor Stephen Strange, Benedict Wong as Wong, Don Cheadle as War Machine / James Rhodes, Anthony Mackie as Falcon / Sam Wilson, Chris Pratt as Star-Lord / Peter Quill, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax the Destroyer, Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon, Vin Diesel as Groot, Palm Clemente as Mantis, Karen Gillan as Nebula, Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther / T'Challa, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes / White Wolf, Paul Bettany as Vision, Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch / Wanda Maximoff, Carrie Coon as Proxima Midnight, Terry Notary as Cole Obsidian, Tom Von Lawyer as Ebony Maw, Michael James Shaw as Corvus Glaive, and Peter Dinklage as King Eitri. But it also features tons of returning characters from past films such as Shuri Okoye, Ayo, Happy Hogan, Ned, Pepper Potts, M'Baku, the Collector, Heimdall, etc. But also 3 more characters that I'll talk about later on. And some last few things before I officially get started. This will be a full spoiler review because I can't really contain myself for this one. Also, if for some reason you haven't seen Black Panther or any of the other MCU movies, spoilers for those too. And also, Black Panther surprisingly became one of the highest grossing films of all time, which is insane, because it beat out superhero movies such as the first 2 Avengers, the flopped but much anticipated Justice League, etc. My dad and I think it was mainly the timing that it came out, making it kind of like a zeitgeist. And lastly, a recap of on the Infinity Stones and Thanos. So Thanos first appeared in the MCU anyway on an after-credit scene on Avengers, where he smiles because he was behind the Chitauri invasion. And then he was a bigger part on Guardians of the Galaxy, where it was revealed that he adopted Gamora and killed her whole race to be sisters with his daughter, Nebula, and every time she lost, she would replace a little piece of Nebula's body with Machine. And he also has 4 other adopted children, which he actually has 5 of in the comics, named the Black Order, or the Children of Thanos, who are Proxima Midnight, Cole Obsidian, Ebony Maw, and Corvus Glaive. And then in an after-credit scene on Avengers Age of Ultron, he opened a door to the real Infinity Gauntlet, unlike the fake one in Odin's vault, revealed on Thor Ragnarok, and said, "Fine, I'll do it myself." And there was also a comic book explaining everything that happens right before this film. It's called like Infinity War Prelude or something like that. like Steve Rogers breaking out the rest of his team from the raft, Tony Stark getting his new suit ready, which is my new favorite one of his suits of all time. It is the Mark 50, aka the Bleeding Edge suit, where he wears a special hoodie and thinks of it after like pulling these two little strings on his stomach, and it foams around him just like Black Panther's newest suit with the nanotech. And he can also transform weapons and accessories like huge arm blasters, extra wing things for space, an extra bigger feet booster to make him go super fast, shields, etc. And is definitely his most slim suit yet. Anyway, the Infinity Stones are 6 stones that were created along with the universe itself. The first to appear in the MCU was the Space Stone, which is the blue one that was originally in the Tesseract, which appeared in Captain America, or that was in the Tesseract, which appeared in Captain America, the First Avenger, the Avengers, and was last seen in Thor Ragnarok, with Loki eyeing it before Asgard got blown to pieces. And then there was the Mind Stone, which is the yellow one that was in Loki's scepter, but was last seen in Vision's forehead. It appeared in Thor: The Mightiest Avenger, the Avengers Age of Ultron, and Captain America: Civil War. And then the Power Stone, which is the purple one that was in the orb, which appeared on Guardians of the Galaxy, and was last seen in a new, more sleek orb casing with Irani Rael putting it in a vault on planet Xandar. And then the Reality Stone, which is the red one that was the ether that appeared on Thor: The Dark World, and was last seen with some Asgardians giving it to the Collector on planet Nowhere, which is his collection place. Got blown up by his pink girl helper person grabbing the Power Stone on Guardians of the Galaxy. And then there was the Time Stone, which is the green one, which appeared on Doctor Strange and Thor Ragnarok. In his iconic Eye of Agamotto, which was last seen around Doctor Strange's neck. And the last one, which all of us fans have been making tons of theories of where it could be, the Soul Stone, which is the orange one and has been said to be the most powerful of them all. And one thing I was super worried about was that Thanos wouldn't get all of the stones in this movie, or at least not the Soul Stone. But yes, this film solved my almost 4-year mystery. And real quick, another one of the huge mysteries in this film was if Clint Barton / Hawkeye, Laura Barton, Scott Lang / Ant-Man, Hope Van Dyne / Wasp, and / Aura Carol Danvers / Captain Marvel was going to be in this film, and I can confirm they are not in this movie at all. Alright, so as expected, this film starts exactly where Thor Ragnarok left off, with the escaped ship with all of the Asgardians getting blocked off by Thanos' ship, the Sanctuary 2. We hear no music during the Marvel Studios logo opening, all we hear is the distress signal. And by the way, the Marvel Studios logo had a 10 as the I.O. on Studios, since this is the 10th anniversary of the MCU. Anyway, the ship is a wreck, and it seems as though that pretty much everyone is dead, but there are no signs of Korg, Meek, and Valkyrie. But I really hope at least Korg lived, because he's like one of my favorite characters from Thor Ragnarok. But anyway, at this time, Thanos already has the Power Stone, and it is said that he already got it from Xandar after demolishing it. And of course, Loki eyeballed the Tesseract on Thor Ragnarok, so yes, he did take it. But Thanos thinks that Thor has it, so he starts crushing his head as seen on the trailer, and so Hulk runs out and starts to battle Thanos. But Thanos whoops his butt, and this is actually the only time we see Hulk in the movie for about a minute and a half. And Thanos is in his armor, this is the only time we see Thanos in his armor on this movie, except for the flashback scenes. So yes, a lot of the scenes in this trailer were CGI'd to change the Hulk's appearances, what stones Thanos has at certain times, etc. And Ebony uses his telekinetic powers to use metal rubble to wrap around Thor and cover his mouth. And the Black Order is with Thanos, and Ebony tells the others to not interfere and let Thanos have his fun. But then Loki fesses up and gives the Tesseract to Thanos, who crushes it and then puts the Space Stone into the gauntlet. Loki tries to trick Thanos and thrusts his blade to his throat, but Thanos catches it with his energy. But after Thanos sent Loki and the Chitauri on their mission on the first Avengers, and he had even more failed attempts than that, he has had enough, and already our first character death happens. Yes, Thanos kills off Loki. And finally, I think for good this time. He just slowly crushes his throat while Thor watches with the Sanctum Sanctorum. watches with his mouth covered. and then goes to kill Hulk, but Heimdall uses the Bifrost to send him back to Earth, where he crashes into the Sanctum Sanctorum, where Steven and Wong find him in the floor later on. And then Thanos, yes, kills the longtime character of Heimdall as well, using Corvus' glaive through his chest, which also means that my number one theory of where the Soul Stone was not true, because I thought it was in Heimdall. But he closes his fist, teleporting him and the Black Order away, and he also blows up the ship while Thor becomes free, and crawls over to Loki and cries on him before he gets sent flying away. It then goes back to Earth where Tony is talking to Pepper about a dream he had about them having a baby, until a portal opens and Doctor Strange says that Tony Stark needs to join him. Eventually he does, where he meets Bruce and Wong back at the Sanctum Sanctorum. Wong talks about the Infinity Stones, and then that scene where Tony is leaning on that cauldron and the cloak of levitation slaps him off, and he just accepts it happens. But then one of those giant ring ships shows up right outside, so they start evacuating the area and helping Bruce since he is pretty much helpless. And I really like that, seeing the city like that and Tony helping people like that reminded me of Iron Man 3. But it was also haunting like most of this film. But then Ebony Maw and Cole Obsidian show up, and after some battling and roast sessions like Tony saying "stop, you're embarrassing me" in front of wizards, and then him calling Ebony Maw Squidward, Ebony captures Strange behind bricks on a building and then gets his hand burnt by grabbing the Eye of Agamotto, since Strange had a spell protecting it. And then they fight some more, but then Ebony straps Strange by wrapping him tightly in the cement, but he escapes, and this is when the Stan Lee cameo happens, because he drives the bus that Peter is on. So, like I've been saying in the past few MCU movie reviews, most of the Phase 3 cameos have been my favorite ones, mainly this one, the one on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and the one on Thor Ragnarok. Anyway, this is when Peter sees the ship from his bus and gets Ned to create a distraction, where he pulls out his earbud, looks over, and then makes everyone scream and run to the back of the bus, because he yells we're all going to die. So Peter can get his mask on and get out of the bus, where he then swings under a bridge and heads into battle. Tony fights Cole, but then he swings his hammer thing, and then Spider-Man catches it, and they battle him more. And Strange teleports him to an Arctic place as he tries to grab them, but he closes the portal, cutting off his hand. So Peter gets onto the ship as it takes off and hangs on, as Tony starts to fly after it. He eventually tells Veronica to activate the Iron Spider suit, and to send it onto Peter before he runs out of oxygen. And then Tony activates his big feet booster thing so he can catch up. Peter passes out, and then the suit arrives and transforms over his regular suit right as he's falling back to Earth. But then after his awesome reveal shot, Tony activates Peter's parachute, but he ends up staying on the ship anyway. Then Bruce takes the cell phone that Steve Rogers mailed to Tony Stark at the end of Captain America Civil War, just in case he needed him because Tony did not want to call, and he dropped it during the battle, and then Wong teleports himself back to the Sanctum Sanctorum to protect it. Anyway, back in space, the Guardians pick up a distress signal and go to it while listening to Peter Quill's new mixtape, and Team Groot is playing on his phone games like most of this movie. It turns out that it was the Asgardian ship, and they see all of the dead floating bodies in the blown up ship, and then Thor crashes into the window as Rocket yells, "Wipers, wipers, get it off." But they take him in, and Mantis practically revives him, and then Peter gets jealous of Gamora flirting with Thor, and so he makes up manly things, and then talks to him in a deeper accented voice like Thor's, and he carries this on for a while, not the voice thing though. They feed him while Gamora tells them all about Thanos. Thor talks to her about how she knows, or Thor talks to her about how she knows so much about him. And then she hints at a secret that she knows that she wants them to kill her if she gets forced to say it. And we get a hilarious scene with Drax about him showing off his new ability to hold so still that he becomes invisible, but eats his chips, and then Mantis says hi to him, and he says, "Dang it." Which was completely random, but it was pretty darn funny. And earlier Thor says that he needs to get to a planet called Nidavellir to forge his weapon called Stormbreaker, and they say that sounds like a made-up word, and he says all words are made up. And no one wants to go except for Rocket, so Team Groot, Rocket Raccoon, and Thor take the detachable mini pod ship from the Guardians' new ship, which is basically just an orange Milano. while the rest of the Guardians head off to Planet Nowhere to prevent Thanos from getting the Reality Stone from the Collector, since Thor told them that that's where it is, since he sent those Asgardians to give it to the Collector on Thor the Dark World. And Rocket says that he won a bet with a guy and got a working fake eyeball for him. And he says, "No, I didn't win an eye, I won credits. Then I stole his eye while he was sleeping." And then Thor takes off his eye patch and puts in his new eye and then adjusts it. So then it goes back to where Doctor Strange is being tortured by Ebony Maw on one of the little circle ships, slowly poking those translucent spikes into his face. But Strange still does not spell the spell, or lift the spell. And then Tony and Peter get onto the ship, and Peter, with his great little movie references the film Aliens. And so Tony blasts a hole in the wall, sucking Ebony Maw out into space, and almost Doctor Strange too, but then Iron Spider's legs pop out and saves him. And then Tony seals the hole using nanotech stuff, and this is where Tony and Strange say the adults are talking. Tony tells Peter that he's an Avenger now, and Strange and Peter officially meet, where we get like, "Oh, we're using or I'm Peter Parker, I'm Steven, or I'm Doctor Strange. Oh, we're using our made-up names when I'm Spider-Man." So Strange then says that they should go back to Earth, but Tony says that they should just go and take Thanos head on. So they work together to use Thanos' pilot arm control things to pilot the donut ship, as Tony calls it. Back on Earth, we get to see one of the other groups form, because there is the Space/Titan group consisting of Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Star-Lord, Drax, and Mantis. The Weapon Quest group consisting of Thor, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot. And then the Wakanda group, which consists of Captain America, Black Widow, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Bruce Banner, Black Panther, Falcon, Bucky, War Machine, and the whole Wakandan army. But anyway, this is where we see Wakanda and Vision in Scotland, and as we see in the trailer, Vision is in his human form, just looking like Paul Bettany, with just the Mind Stone showing until he hides that as well. They discuss the future of their relationship that has been building since the ending of Avengers Age of Ultron. And they go for a walk where they see a TV in a little kiosk thing. They see New York City getting attacked, and then Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive show up to retrieve the Mind Stone from Vision. Vision ends up getting stabbed by Corvus, and he goes off for a while Wanda fends them off. And this is one of the other scenes, one of the other scenes happens that was released on Good Morning America, because Captain America shows up and catches Proxima's spear, because like a speed train passes by, and then there's just like his silhouette just standing there, and then he catches the spear and comes out in an epic reveal shot. And then Black Widow then shows up and helps, and ends up stabbing Corvus, and then Falcon flies in and kicks Proxima, making her go flying. She then crawls over and tells Corvus to get up, and he says that he can't. War Machine shows up later in his new War Machine Mark IV armor with cool digital camouflage, and Thaddeus Ross makes his little cameo as a message hologram thing with James Rhodes, and of course he tells Thanos to arrest them and to bring them in. But yes, James even just hangs up because they don't have time to deal with the Sokovia Accords right now. And later on, Bruce is already there, and they all decide to go to Wakanda to prepare for war. And this is also the only time Hawkeye and Ant-Man are referenced, because they ask like where they are in Captain America. Of course, since he broke his whole team out of jail, and Hawkeye and Ant-Man were both part of his team on Civil War, he says that they're both kind of just with their families on like house arrest and stuff. It then shows Wakanda preparing for their arrival, and then Bucky stops working with the farm animals to retrieve a box which has his brand new arm, which is vibranium and has gold highlights since Tony blasted it off on Captain America Civil War. Then back in space, Star-Lord, Drax, Gamora, and Mantis arrive at Planet Nowhere. Then the first leaked scene happens where they are quietly sneaking into the Collector's museum place. Thanos is interrogating the Collector, but then Gamora ends up just running in and attacking Thanos, and she ends up killing him. But it turns out that, of course, he's not actually dead, and he has had the Reality Stone all along, and he was waiting for them to show up so he could get Gamora to bring him to the Soul Stone. So he breaks her sword in half, it disintegrates, and then walks in for real as the Collector stops saying bravo and clapping, and also disappears, and the whole nice museum turns out to already be completely demolished, and the Collector is most likely actually dead. He grabs Gamora, incapacitates Drax and Mantis by turning them into block thing-looking things temporarily, and in a sad and intense scene, Gamora yells at Peter to shoot her. and he eventually decides that he has to, but then bubbles come out when he presses the trigger, and then Thanos teleports away. Then, back on Earth, the heroes arrive in Wakanda, which was a great scene, and Steve and Bucky finally get to meet back up, which is where he says, like, "Oh, how you doing, Bucky?" And then he says, "Pretty good for the end of the world." Then the final GMA scene happens where Bruce and Shuri are trying to figure out how to separate the Mind Stone from Vision's forehead without killing him. And then Steve gets his awesome new Wakandan shields, and Bruce gets the Hulkbuster Mark II to work on a little bit, and then he will use that for the war. Anyway, Thanos and Gamora are then currently on the Sanctuary 2, and then we get a flashback scene where it shows how Thanos slaughtered half of Gamora's population and took her in. It's quite tragic, too, because she loses her mom after they come out of hiding, and then Thanos says that he'll help her find her, and then takes her into a gazebo kind of place, and then distracts her by giving her a perfectly balanced double-sided blade thing, while Ebony gives the orders for the Chitauri soldiers that guarded Thanos and Gamora walking to the gazebo, and then they shoot, mowing down all of Gamora's race. And it was very Holocaust-like, in my opinion. And later on, Gamora is working for him, and yes, finds the map to the Soul Stone, but she decides to destroy the map. So yes, all this time the Soul Stone map was located on Titan, but it has to be obtained on a planet called Vormir. But it is not a physical item, and in this scene, it is where Thanos is wearing his armor with a bigger helmet as seen on the trailers, and then back in modern day, Gamora refuses, so he reveals Nebula floating, trapped, being torn apart bit by bit. But eventually, Thanos reveals her lying by activating Nebula's memories, and she gives up, and they both leave the ship. And then Nebula escapes by killing the repair guy that put her back together. Thanos and Gamora arrive at the location, which is a huge, skinny mountain place with two tower things on top of it, and all shallow water around the mountain, with a huge solar eclipse. And you know the whole theory that Hugo Weaving's Red Skull never died at the end of Captain America, the first Avenger, because when he grabbed the Tesseract, it just sent him into space? Well, it turns out that was true, because on the top of the mountain they are greeted by Red Skull, who is now wearing a cloak with a hood and is floating, which I honestly freaked out about. He says that to obtain the Soul Stone, Thanos must sacrifice the soul of someone he truly loves, and Gamora starts laughing and says that it's not possible because Thanos never truly loved anyone. But she looks over and notices Thanos actually tearing up. He then grabs her and she pulls out the blade that he gave her in the flashback scene and tries to kill herself. But Thanos stops her and then throws her off the cliff. It then shows her dead at the bottom, and then it cuts back to Thanos, who is now down in the shallow water, and then the Soul Stone spawns. So now he has 4 out of 6, and I have to say, I slightly teared up at some of the scenes on this film, and this is probably number 2, even though Gamora was probably the only shortest-lived MCU A-list hero. So then Thor, Rocket, and Groot get to Nidavellir, where the dwarves crafted Mjolnir, and Thor finds out that the Forge is off to make his new weapon, but eventually they find the King of the Dwarves, Eitri. He is Peter Dinklage, but not small for once, because these dwarves are actually like 10 feet tall. But then we find out that he is the most talented craftsman dwarf, and that he actually crafted the Infinity Gauntlet for Thanos before he wiped out all of his kind except for him. Anyway, he gets his forge going by Thor latching a rope to the pod ship and swinging it and then making it fly with him to get to the center of the contraption, but he has to go into the middle of the contraption so he can pull the 2 handle things to direct the beam from a dying star to light the forge, just like Mjolnir. And in this scene, he gets burned and almost dies, and ends up passing out and falling back down to the ground. But then he creates the metal part of the Stormbreaker, and then Eitri asks for the handle, which of course Groot provides, and Rocket helps well in all of the dwarves' legacy. But then Thor wakes up and retrieves his completed Stormbreaker and believes it will defeat Thanos. Then back in Wakanda, they detect a disturbance in the atmosphere, and then the Outrider dropships come crashing down. And of course, this is where the Outriders come in, which is of course the only Lego set that I got from this movie, since I don't really get Legos anymore, of course, for a while. And the Outriders are basically Thanos' big army, but at least there's no beam shooting into the sky or anything like that. But they're 4-armed alien things that are basically just really strong and fast, and they got nerfed from the comics because in the comics they could use tactile telepathy, invisibility, and density control, so they would be impossible to defeat hundreds upon thousands of. Then Proxima and Cole show up outside the shield. They talk to Steve, T'Challa, and Natasha and inside the shield, and Proxima tells Natasha that she'll pay for killing Corvus, even though she didn't. And outside, the Outriders unknowingly pound on the Wakanda shield, so they die. But some get through after tons get a big pile of limbs made. And the first few dropships crash right on top of the shield, blowing them up. And then the whole army gets assembled outside. The Black Panther sends them in on his chant, as seen from the Chant TV spot. And then the Wakanda War commences. That fight Steve is so bloody and gory, it just looks like he was fighting some raw hamburger meat. And back inside, Shuri is still working on Vision, and Wanda is taking refuge in the city, as the Outriders make a plan to get around them, but Steve and T'Challa come up with a plan to crash theirs. And they run in front of the whole army, since they're since they have the enhanced speed, and they're running 30 miles an hour in front of the whole army was there, and they were racing to them. That was a cool scene. So anyway, and then back in space, Tony, Peter, and Steven crash land on Titan. Then the remaining Guardians show up, and everyone starts battling each other. But they stop after a little bit because Thor already told the Guardians earlier about them. They introduce themselves by saying they're the Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes. And Peter Quill says, like Kevin Bacon, and he asks Peter if Footloose is still the best movie ever made. And Peter says, I don't think it ever was the best movie ever made. And then Tony comes up with a plan, but Steven uses the Eye of Agamotto to see the future and sees only one way to defeat Thanos. And back in Wakanda, the war rages on, and finally Bruce gets to use the Hulkbuster Mark II correctly, because when they were all getting over there in the hovercraft things, he was so excited, but tripping, flying, and it was great. And he, of course, gets to fight Cole, but he has a lot of trouble and gets tackled by tons of Outriders. But eventually, Hulkbuster gets his arm ripped off, and he eventually puts a Hulkbuster hand thing on Cole's only hand. And he says, see you later, and then Cole flies up to the shield, and it drags him along the top of it, slowly shredding him to nothing. So that was really cool. And then Proxima and Black Widow face off for the last time in an epic battle. And then the giant razor wheels called Threshers get released out of the ground, and Proxima gets splattered, finishing her off and splattering blue blood on Natasha's face. And the Threshers are flying everywhere right as Thor appears, smashing tons of Outriders, and now that he has Stormbreaker, he is even more powerful than at the end of Thor Ragnarok. And of course, Groot and Rocket join in the war as well. And this great scene happens where Rocket talks to Bucky and asks him how much for his gun. Bucky replies, it's not for sale. And then Rocket says, how about your arm? And Bucky just runs away. And Rocket whispers, I'll get that arm. Since he has a weird obsession with stealing prosthetic limbs, like the prisoner's leg that he made Star-Lord steal when they're breaking out of the kiln on the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and the eye for Thor, and now an attempt for this. And also Rocket introduces himself to Steve and then Groot, who stabs through 3 Outriders, kind of like the Kree soldiers on first Guardians of the Galaxy. And then he yells, I am Groot, and Steve yells back, I am Steve. And also Rocket calls the Outriders space dogs as one runs by on fire, like a Call of Duty Zombies Hellhound. And War Machine goes full force, like seen on Civil War and Iron Man 2. Then, back on Titan, Thanos shows up for the Time Stone and starts battling Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and the Guardians. Strange and him talk when he first shows up anyway. And Thanos uses the Reality Stone to create Titan how it used to be before trying to convince Strange that him wiping out his own race was for cleansing and balancing, but then one by one each character takes their shot. And this is where Thanos makes a nearby orbiting moon come crashing down, which was just insane. And Strange uses his powers to create energy stair platforms for Star-Lord to jump across, and he also makes portals for Spider-Man to swing through, and for that one scene of Star-Lord hopping back into a portal, flipping off Thanos after saying boom, after putting a bomb on him. And with his current stones, he takes fire from Iron Man and blows it back at him, and then takes an energy blast from Doctor Strange and then sends a portal-looking blast back at him. And they try stopping him from closing his fist, so it'll be a lot easier to take off the gauntlet. And so after Iron Man stops him, Mantis jumps in, freezing him from moving at all. And everyone helps him at this time to completely immobilize him. Then Iron Spider and Iron Man get the gauntlet to his fingertips, but then Mantis says that she can feel Thanos being remorseful, and then Nebula asks where Gamora is. And so Star-Lord figures out that she has died, which makes him flip out. He hits Mantis on accident after slowly walking to Thanos, yelling at him while Tony yells at him to cool down, and he tries to hold him back as seen in the trailers. But then he punches Thanos' face a few times, and so of course Thanos becomes free, grabs back the gauntlet, and is now in full rage mode. So he grabs Peter by the throat, slamming him down while the others help him, And that was horrible, seeing Peter helplessly squirm around like that, almost like the beginning of the final battle on Spider-Man Homecoming. Then Doctor Strange generates tons of copies of himself to trap Thanos with tons of his energy lasso things, but he is unsuccessful. Iron Man creates a blade and faces off against Thanos one-on-one, which is awesome. But then Thanos tears up Iron Man's suit and then takes his blade and stabs him right in the gut, making him bleed out of his mouth. And I thought that this was where the man who started it all was going to die. But Thanos carries him over by his blade in his gut and throws him onto a boulder. But then Doctor Strange stops him and opens up the Eye of Agamotto and gives the Time Stone to Thanos in exchange for Tony's life. And then Thanos teleports to Earth. Back in Wakanda, Corvus, the last remaining member of the Black Order, shows up in Shuri's lab and tries to remove the Mind Stone one last time, but Shuri uses her Panther Gauntlet blasters to fend him off. But then Vision and Corvus battle for a little bit and end up outside in the forest. Vision gets stabbed by Corvus again, and then Captain America gets with Scarlet Witch and helps her battle. And eventually Vision ends up getting Corvus's glaive and stabs him with it, officially ending off the whole Black Order. And so now Nebula is Thanos' last child, adopted or blood. But then Vision senses Thanos coming using the Mind Stone, and he goes to Wanda and tells her that she must remove it from his head and destroy it before Thanos gets it. And of course Wanda does not want to do that at all, but eventually decides that it has to be done, so she uses her powers to shatter it, which creates a huge blast, of course killing Vision. But then Thanos arrives right behind Wanda. Then these epic shots that were somewhat slower than real time show Thanos taking on each hero one by one as Hulkbuster runs at him, but then he warps him, making him go flying by him, and then makes him normal again, but builds him into a rock wall. And then he makes Bucky fall, Falcon's wings fail, War Machine crash, and then he grabs Black Panther by the throat right as he jumps at him and then slams him down, making his purple blast fly out. But then Steve steps in and does the most epic shot from the trailers, where he catches Thanos' fist and holds it back as they grimace at each other. And I thought that this was going to be Steve's last few seconds alive before getting smashed into the ground, but Thanos does overpower him and just completely slams him down by punching with his other fist. And he just severely beats him, and then Wanda tries fending him off, but he is not even phased, having 5 of the 6 stones. And he uses the Time Stone and goes back in time to before Vision died and stops Wanda, and then he rips the stone out of Vision's forehead, leaving a huge dark crater in it, and then he turns black and white and falls over dead once again. And he then puts the final stone in the gauntlet, completing it, which was so horrible for the characters, but I fanboyed. And then out of nowhere, Thor lunges at Thor and strikes the axe into the Stormbreaker right into Thanos' chest, and Thor yells at Thanos about him being defeated and that he has failed. And you know how in the comics Thanos snaps his fingers once he gets all of the Infinity Stones, ending almost all life in the universe? And I was saying that he's definitely not going to do that in this film. Well, I was wrong, because he snaps his fingers and then Thor, enraged, yells, "What have you done?" a few times. But then Thanos does not answer. He is shown in an orange place with just the gazebo place. And a little girl, Gamora, asks him if he accomplished it and what for, and he says for everything. And then goes back to real life. The gauntlet is now weird and deteriorated, and then he pops out the Stormbreaker and then flies back into a portal. Then all the music goes away, just silence. Captain America runs over to Thor and asks what has happened, but Thor was speechless. Then Bucky walks over to Steve and says that he does not know what's going on. And then he very creepily crumbles and floats away into gray ash-looking stuff. Then Black Panther and many others. Then on Titan, all of those heroes do too. And then Peter talks to Tony and says that he does not feel very good, and then Tony walks him backwards, and then he starts crying while repeating, "Mr. Stark, please don't let me go," while laying in his arms very injured, and then he looks to the side and turns to ash. And even though he is one of the characters for sure coming back, that was my number 1 tearjerker scene because of how scared and sad he was, and a lot more. Then Tony slowly turns and rests his head on his hands and starts to sob, knowing that they have failed horribly, and the only ones who didn't turn to ash were the original MCU Avengers, or characters that have also been in the MCU since the beginning. And then it shows Thanos arriving on the planet, and then he fully heals himself while watching the sunset like he was talking about earlier, and he smiles knowing that he has saved humanity from destroying itself, and then it ends. So after the credits, which were a lot more basic font with just cinematic music and a black screen, which was highly unusual, there's one after credit scene which I did not think that there was going to be any of on this on this movie, but I just stayed in case like always. And it officially ends with the long time missing from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Nick Fury driving his truck with Maria Hill as a truck in front of them crashes and they see a lot of wreckage. They both get out and see that there is no driver in the truck. Some people run by and also turn into ash. Right as a helicopter without a pilot crashes into a tower behind them. Then Maria starts to turn into ash, and so Nick Fury goes to his truck and pulls out his communicator device and starts dialing. And then so does Nick Fury, right as he was, of course, about to cuss, as Samuel L. Jackson does, and drops his communicator. It then pulls into the screen to show the logo and colors for Captain Marvel, and it then says Thanos will return. So yes, this film does end with a big cliffhanger, but I will talk about that more in just a little bit. But this definitely sets up Captain Marvel to probably defeat Thanos in Avengers 4 coming next spring, since he has been said to be the most powerful hero in the MCU now. And of course, we've gotten set photos which look like they may go back in time to the first Avengers, but with Ant-Man and a few other characters, unless they were fake, which I doubt they were. But anyway, I think the next one will be Captain Marvel teaming up with the still living heroes for their big last movie, and then most, if not all of them, will die. And then it will set up the new heroes for Phase 4 and on, like Spider-Man, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, and so on. And then a lot of the characters that turned into Ash will of course return, but some of them may stay gone, like some of the Wakandans, maybe Scarlet Witch. Okay, just checking my camera was still on. I thought it went quiet or something. So like some of the Wakandans, maybe Scarlet Witch, and I honestly think also Nick Fury and Maria Hill, because yes, Nick Fury is going to be on 2019's Captain Marvel, but that is going to be a prequel film with the Skrulls, and before Nick Fury even lost his eye and became bald. But for all of the other people who turned it into going to be a prequel film, but for all of the other people who turned into Ash, I think they will pretty much all return. And for the deaths, Loki, I am almost certain, is dead for good this time. He has came back from the dead like 3 times now and has been in the MCU since Thor the Mightiest Avenger. Heimdall, I think, is permanent too, just because his character arc was already pretty much done, and he has been around for quite some time as well. Vision, I think, is gone for good as well, and lastly, Gamora as well. Although she was very short-lived, she really shined in this film, and if they brought her back, that would kill off almost all emotional tension, and would make the Soul Stones story and power almost worthless. And also, I think the Collector is also dead for good if he did for sure get killed. And same with the for sure dead Black Order. And since that place that Thanos saw the little girl Gamora was completely orange, I think maybe everyone that turned into Ash is currently stuck inside the Soul Stone, because it can do that. Okay, so now for my pros. First off, as far as just plain cinematic music goes, this film has the best out of it of the whole MCU so far, in my opinion. Also, you guys know that my favorite MCU villain was Ego the Living Planet, and there was also villains / sometimes anti-heroes like Loki, but also Eric Killmonger and Obadiah Stane were some of the best villains in the MCU. But as many people are saying that I also agree with, Thanos is the new best MCU villain. I wanted him to be, but honestly I didn't think he was going to be able to. But just his emotional tension to Gamora and how throughout the other films and this one he gives pretty much every hero a good reason to want to kill him, but also a lot like Killmonger, his motivations are good and not generic. They believe that what they're doing is the right thing, and you root for and against these great villains. So finally, I think Marvel is really getting on track with not only everything else, but now their villains too. But also, I thought that this film was going to be way more serious, but it still had a lot of humor, and of course, like almost always with the MCU, it almost all landed. But for the character juggling, it somehow worked. The Russo brothers outdid our expectations already with the great airport battle on Captain America Civil War. But this was just like that times 40. Just how almost every B to A-list character had their time to shine, and their choice to do the group thing worked flawlessly. In my opinion, they did the impossible, but also the visual effects were some of the best of the MCU, And one concern a lot of people had was the Russo brothers handling characters developed in the MCU by many other directors, because this can cause a character's personality to change. But no one suffered from that, not even Thor, who was, for the best, really changed in Thor Ragnarok. And this movie did not seem as long as it was, and how it could just go right off the bat, since they already had all of the other movies to develop the characters. And honestly, this film had my favorite villain, and is now my favorite MCU film, beating Captain America Civil War and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Just like I honestly hoped it would. And also I loved how for the rest of the movie Bruce is yelling at the Hulk to come out, and he turns slightly green, or his head turns into Hulk's head inside the Hulkbuster suit, and he just yells no, like a kid scared to come out since he just got whooped by Thanos. But lastly, back to the cliffhanger. This is one of the only good cliffhangers out of any movie I've seen, and you guys know I've seen so many movies. My movie poster wall, I've seen like hundreds upon thousands, maybe just coming up on 1,000. In part 2, so because this film is still pretty much a part 1 to a 2-part movie, as it was originally called Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. But now the second one subtitle is just currently unknown, but this still feels like a complete story and a complete film with a beginning, middle, and end. And I was not let down and annoyed by the cliffhanger, and the costume design and makeup was amazing, like pretty much always with the MCU. But for my cons, while Thanos was great, the Black Order was really cool, but kind of forgettable. The only one that you really got to somewhat start to care for was the first to be killed off, Ebony Maw. But also, I know Thanos doesn't need armor anymore, with how powerful he is now. But I do still like his look with his original MCU armor, not the big helmet with the 2 things sticking off, but the armor seen in the Avengers and the first Guardians of the Galaxy. But it has grown on me, so it's not too big of a deal. But also, the Hulkbuster Mark II suit is really cool, but I honestly like the Mark I from Avengers Age of Ultron better, because first off, I just think it looks a little more cool, but also this one just seemed really nerfed and a lot weaker. The one from Age of Ultron seemed a lot better, inconvenient and everything. But I guess those aren't really even cons, just me nitpicking. But the last thing I have is what I call the boy who cried wolf problem, which for these Marvel movies, they're a lot of times scared to kill off big characters, or when they do, they bring them back not long after. The only one that they've done it with so far is like Quicksilver, and then of course like the villains and stuff of a lot of them. But I just fear like, because some of the characters from this movie I know are actually dead. But I understand, like, the ones that are going to be brought back are going to be brought back, but I'm just worried, like, I'm really worried, because it just takes away a lot of emotional tension when you just know that, some of them that you think are permanently dead might come back. Like, who knows, maybe the Vision and Gamora will come back, which, I mean, I really, honestly don't hope, I hope they don't. So that I just hope that the people that they officially killed off do stay dead, and on the next one, whoever they kill off also. And a lot of their contracts are ending, and Chris Evans said that he wants to work behind the camera now and everything. And like all the original Avengers contracts are like over now and everything. So finish this off. So finally, overall, I loved Avengers Infinity War, and I am so happy to finally do my review on it. I definitely recommend going and seeing it and buying it once it comes out in physical media. I already can't wait to watch it again. So you guys know my favorite of all time physical media release, this digipack of Thor Ragnarok. I definitely, when they release the physical media for Infinity War, I'm definitely going to try getting the digipack for that, since it's my favorite MCU movie, but I just cannot wait to see how the digipack's going to be for that. So keep on watching, so make sure like and subscribe. So finally that's pretty much it. I know this is insanely long. You might be wondering, why is it that long for movie review? But as I said, and the title says, it's an Avengers Infinity War summary and review. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys liked my 2 little crafts, my drawing and my little shield, and my review. So happy to finally get that out. But that is pretty much it for this video. So make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!